Recently, I had a chance to speak with Zubin, who is very successful in a lot of different careers and has gone through tremendous changes in his life. First, he was a very successful lawyer. Then he gained an MBA. He started his own tech startup. He left the tech startup, learned to code. Then he joined Google as a software developer. He worked for Google for some time, left Google, then joined another tech startup. He's currently managing that. He's also an entrepreneur and he's a life coach and a career mentor. Extremely humble guy, very intelligent, very smart, has done a lot of different things in his career. I personally gained so much information by speaking with him, and I wish I had known these things earlier in my career. I would have made substantial progress. So I hope you find meaning from this podcast. And now, without any delay, let's get started.
So my name is Zubin Pratap. I'm a software engineer now in DevRel Engineering. I have an unusual background. I was a lawyer for a very long time. I did my law in India, practiced there for a while, and practiced for over 10 years in Australia, which is where I'm now based. And then when I was 37, 38, I decided I wanted to become a software engineer and reboot my career. Extremely hard thing to do. Did it, worked for a fantastic tiny startup for about a year, then joined Google as an engineer for a few years. Then I wanted to go back to the startup world, so I left Google and I'm at Chainlink Labs now, which is definitely one of the best places I've ever worked. It's a company in the blockchain space, blockchain infrastructure, and that's where I am now. Yeah. Yeah. So there wasn't a clear point, to be honest, Parth. So I also coach people who are on career change as well. I do that sometimes. And so um, I keep trying to tell people it's not like one day you wake up and you decide, okay, I'm just going to do this. It's actually, it took the actual process of even deciding I wanted to leave the law took a lot of courage. And that took 3 to 5 years to admit to myself that, okay, the last 10 years of sunk cost, I need to let it go. I need to be okay with closing the door on that part of my life. And then, okay, now where do I start? What do I do? What am I going to do? Am I going to earn a lot less money? There's all these psychological things, right? So when I work with my coaching students, I'm always emphasizing the psychology, because the truth is everybody wants something, everybody has a dream, but everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to go there, right? Which is a weird situation to be in. Like, you want the six packs, but you don't want to do the stomach crunches, so it's the same situation with the career change. So for me, there was no one thing. Over many years, I decided, okay, I think I want to move away from the law and I wanted to be on the business side of things. So I did an MBA. I left the law before I became a coder. I left the law and went into what's known as a commercial role in sort of middle management. I did my MBA at night. And really through that entire process, I think what I really discovered is that to achieve a goal, it's not enough to just wish and want it. You've got to really want it. And everybody will have a different price to pay them. So you've seen in your life, and I think most people want to pay the price that you paid, or I paid, or their neighbor who got it easy. They want to pay that price. But the reality is, the price we pay for our dreams is unique to us, and it could be ridiculously high compared to somebody else. It could be much lower compared to somebody else. We don't know, but it's the price that we had to pay. So I think that was the hard part, is accepting that. And then I quit my corporate career and tried to do a startup. I was non-technical. I lost six figures in dollars in investing in that startup. I hired a team, built it out. We had a bunch of users. In about 2 years, it was clear the economics is not working out. My tech co-founder, who was working very, very part-time, had a baby, so quit. And I was left on my own. And I had all these contracts with local governments that I had to deliver. And because of that, I was like, I need to learn to code just to deliver these contracts. Otherwise, I will lose reputation in the market. And that's actually how this is the fourth time trying to learn to code. I tried to learn to code for 5 years before that. Tried, failed. Because I was listening to all the social media BS, to be honest. That's the reason I failed. This time, I didn't have the time for the social media. I had to deliver. There was no choice. And so I just learned that way. And then I realized the business is not going well. The unit economics is not working. The product is great. The technology is great. The business is not great. I need to shut it down. Do I want to go back to being a lawyer? And I decided, no, I was 37. I was like, if I go back to being a lawyer, I'll never leave. It was so hard to leave the first time. I'll never leave. It's too addictive with the money and all that, right? So I said, okay, no matter what happens, I don't care if I lose money. I want to be an engineer. And I wanted it more than anything else in the world. Like, I gave up a lot to do this, a lot of sacrifice. And then one thing led to the other. A year later, I got myself a good coach who was non-technical, because I realized the technical stuff is not the hard part. It's the psychology that's really important. Performance coaching. Got a performance coach. She was great. I got all 4 offers that I applied for within 9 months of setting out my new plan. Took one. It was a great startup. The year after that, I ended up joining Google, and then 2.5 years after that, I joined Chainlink. But you have to build in steps, right? I wanted the Google within 3 months, but I knew I was never going to get it. It took 2.5 years. That's the reality of life. So yeah, sorry, that was not a short answer, but I hope that's. I think the reality is, even tech, we're not in an era where you're a cobbler fixing shoes, you're a farrier that's making shoes for horses. The day of having a single skill is gone, right? Every profession these days is compound skills. This is another thing I keep telling my students. So as an engineer, writing code is a very small part of the job, in my opinion, right? Reading code takes much more of my time. Thinking about how the code should be written takes at least as much time as reading it, and thinking then, okay, how is this going to impact the end user? How does this serve the business objectives? And my challenge to myself and my team is, how can we avoid writing code, right? The best code is the code that we don't write, because we don't need to write it. So that way, the only thing you write is extremely focused and is going to move the needle. It's very hard to do, extremely easy to talk about, very hard to do. So, but these are compound skills. These are skills that involve communication, analytical skills, structured thinking, the willingness to make trade-offs, the ability to understand business drivers, the ability to understand organizational dynamics within the organization you're in, the ability to understand economics, the consumer, market demand. These are all the things that I believe contribute to a successful engineer. Now, you can be a very effective coder without being a successful engineer over your career, but just being really good at the code. Great. That works for some people. That's not me. I'm not the strongest coder in the world. I'll be the first one to say it, right? But because of the startup experience, because of the law taught me structured and analytical thinking. But here's the other thing it taught me, Parth. Like, a lot of people think law is all about arguing really well and using big words, or having fancy communication styles. One of the best lessons I ever learned in my legal career was from a judge in Ahmedabad High Court, of all places. Okay, I was visiting from Delhi for a court, and I was in the court, and I said some things, and I was a young lawyer trying to impress everybody, right? And I said some things that sounded really fancy. And later on, the judge took me aside. Later on, the judge, and I met them outside the court just randomly. They were walking past, and they obviously remembered me, and I was from a good law school, and so they remembered that. And they gave me the best piece of advice. They said, and they said this in Hindi, right? So, but I'll say it in English for the channel. They said, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how strong your case is. The only thing that matters is what I understand. Right? Life-changing
Know
lesson.
your audience.
Right? Know your audience. And tell them what they need to know to get your job done right. Too often, like, you look at tech documentation. Just yesterday, I was reading something in somebody's repo, and it explains what the code does. Okay. But it's using terminology that doesn't explain why we ever need it. My big question is, but why? Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do this? There's no point telling me what the code does. You connect to this API, you fetch this response, you get this kind of HTTP code. Great. Why? This is the problem with documentation, is it tells people what, but then unless you know the bigger picture, you can't contextualize what it's doing and why it's important. Why would we even need this thing? Right? And this is why a lot of beginner coders struggle. They don't understand the documentation. Even though the documentation tells them, okay, it'll take these parameters and produce this return result value. Okay, but why? Why do we need this? When will we use this? These are things that we need to really take other people along with us for journey. So, all of this to say, Parth, that so no matter what career you're in, Parth, you will have compound skills. You will have skills that other people don't. And this, because I coach career changes, I see this all the time. I do a lot of audit on the existing skills, do a skills gap, add coding to the skills gap, because there'll be other skills gap, add coding, then they have a nice combined package. But it's hard work. It's hard work to build up all these skills. So yeah. I'll answer the second question first. I said I run a program, and now I've joined with another person in the US because he also works full-time. I also work full-time. Our philosophy is we won't work with most people. Genuinely, we're not trying to exclude people, but the problem with, I think the problem with modern education is everyone's trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? I want to have 5,000 students, I want to have 100,000 students. You look at the Udemy sort of courses, like, and YouTube and all. I think none of that works, because ultimately they're all saying the same thing. JavaScript or Python or English is the same, and whether you spell it or I spell it, we have to follow the same rules, right? So our philosophy is, we enjoy our work, we enjoy what we're doing in our day jobs, we don't really want to change that, but we want to make maximal impact for a few people. Okay, so we work with very few people in a year, maybe 6, 10 people or that in a year, right? And it lasts for a year, and we're available to them on the weekends, basically, because we're working full time. So that's usually how it works. In terms of what made me do it, I actually started the coaching team in before I became an engineer. I was always, when I was in management roles, I really enjoy teaching, and I'm actually not a bad teacher, if I may say so myself. Like, I really try and understand the student and work with them, right? And so I really got a lot of value. Now, I don't have kids, right? So by choice. So for me, being able to make an impact to some other person's life has to come this way. It has to come, in my personal time. So I've always been doing the coaching thing. I did communication coaching for a while. I did career management coaching for a while. I did just, self-management coaching, because that's really important when you become a people manager and a leader. You need to learn to manage yourself. And, that's how I started. Then when I became an engineer, I had a diary, and I remember being on the Free Code Camp podcast, and I remember telling Quincy, who's the founder of Free Code Camp, I said, listen, I have this diary that I maintained for this 4.5 years, when I was trying for 4 times to learn to code, and I failed every time. And I went through that diary, and I decided, and what made me actually succeed was, one, I had a really good coach who helped fix my mindset and my psychology and understand how the market works. But second thing is, I looked at all the things I'd done in the 4.5 years, and I did the opposite. Right? I literally did the inversion thinking. And I realized that that actually is a form of coaching. Right? So I said, what people are trying to do to learn to code does not work. Does not work. They may see 10 people on YouTube like me or whatever, but we represent the minority, and they don't know the real story of how much effort went in. So I said, okay, why didn't I make a course in this? I did a Udemy course, did very well, but less than 10% of people would complete it. There's a reason for this. There's a well understood psychological principle for this, that people don't do things if it's cheap, or they don't do it if they have too many options, they get distracted. We know this, right? So I literally converted that course, expanded in it, and made it into the coaching program. And now we have amazing, we have 100% completion rate, and we have very high success rates, because very few people. And I have to constantly keep them accountable. That's really the answer. Is everything that's available out there in the world is enough? We don't live in a world where information is scarce anymore. We live in a world where there's too much information, which means focus is scarce. My job is now to focus them. Yeah, I have so many books on my shelf that I've half read. So many, right? It's the same thing. There are so many times in my life when I've had a gym membership and didn't go for 2 weeks. We all do this, right? But here's my question for you, because you obviously achieved tremendous success, with your career and all that. How have you learned over the years to control your focus, especially in a world, like you said, when the companies take our focus, they grow. When we use our focus for ourselves, we grow. And this is what people say a lot, right, Prath? Oh, they got lucky, somebody got lucky. Luck matters. Luck matters for everybody, right? There are people who I think would be far better engineers than me, who are probably living in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, who didn't have the opportunity. That's just dumb luck. On the day that you and I went for our interviews, whether Google or Chainlink or Microsoft or whatever, people who are better than us didn't come to that interview. Or if they came to that interview that day, they didn't perform that well, right? That's luck. That's all luck. You have to be prepared. There's no point just saying, oh, some people are lucky. No, but you have enough. Everybody has enough luck coming into their life. The thing is, they're not prepared for it, right? To seize that. And you were paying a huge price, time away from your wife, your personal time on nights and weekends spent in an Uber. That's how you got lucky, is by making a huge personal sacrifice. I mean, that's why, Brian and I, we have on our website that, I guess we call them testimonials, because that was what people call them. But, for us, we ask for feedback, and it ends up often being testimonials, right? And so we put them up on the things so that other people, and they're not that many, maybe 20, 30, because, we don't work with too many people. But all of them, it's always about the impact we've had on their lives, not just the coding thing. And that's the whole point of this, right, Parth? Like, nobody wants to work for a FANG company just because they want to work for a FANG. They want to work for a FANG company because it means more money, more opportunities. They feel proud about themselves. That gives them confidence in other things in life. They move to a nice suburb, other things that come from this benefit, right? And that's what impact is, because if now you can provide for your daughters in a different way, but you've also found meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose makes you happier, makes you a better husband, makes you a better father. That gets better results for them. In 20 years, all these improvements compound, so that your highest, this is what I keep telling my students, our highest achievements in our life becomes the next generation starting point, right? That is impact. That is impact. That's why I do. That's why I spend my nights and weekends. I work really long hours, and I enjoy my job very much. I love it. But the reason I do nights and weekends, what else am I going to do with my time? I don't have kids. I don't want to go and hang out at a bar. Or how boring. I don't want to watch TV all the time. That's a waste of time. It's a loss of my attention. I can put my attention on another human being and change their life and their kids' life. you know it's great. It's wonderful. So I can think of 3 students in the last 2 years that I've worked with. All of whom came, I want to be a software engineer, I want to be a software engineer, I want to be a software engineer. Partly it was money. But really, after 3-4 months of working with them, it became very clear that they didn't like their life, and they weren't living, how I express it in my program is, you're not living in alignment with your values. Now, to live in alignment with your values, you need to have your Maslow's lower hierarchy needs met: food, shelter, human connection. Once that's achieved, then after that you have space for aligning with your values, right? But there's no point trying to align with your values when you can't pay rent. That makes no sense, right? So once your basic needs are met, and then when they align with their values, all those 3 students said to me, we don't think we want to be a software engineer anymore. We actually understand what we want to be. We understand what kind of life we want to live. And they're all doing that now. One of them's teaching, the other one's gone back to their original job but changed their role. They're very happy, and they turned down a role from Tesla, I think, to do that, to turn their back on this career change that they were trying. They stopped, took a U-turn, and said, no, we're now going to live without. And they don't consider themselves to be a failure. They said, this is success for us because we now live in alignment with the values. We are choosing what makes us happy. And I said, yeah, you didn't have to be a software engineer. Nobody says you have to be a software engineer. Be whatever you want, right? Be whatever, just as long as it's aligned with who you are. There's no point wanting to be something you're not. I did that for 15 years as a lawyer because, growing up in India, there were only so many choices. In the 90s, I'm from that generation. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a civil engineer. In 96, 97, when I was getting ready for college, it was law was the only other good college in the country. So and I spent 15 years doing that, right? So now I can do something else. Anyway, so that's just a little thing on values.
How do you deal with substantial changes? And if someone is going through that phase, how they can identify that, hey, I need to change something right now?
Great question, Parth. And I'll be the first one to say, when I say there's no easy answer, I don't just mean it's not easy. I mean it's exceptionally hard, right? And here's why. Most people do want change, but they don't want it enough to, we talked about this last time, pay the price of the change, right? In other words, quite simply, and behavioral change is well documented and understood in psychology, and I've spent a year studying psychology. People will only take action when the pain and cost of inaction is greater than the pain and cost of the action, right? So that's when people change. Most people want to change, but the pain or the perceived pain, risk, and cost of the change is more than the pain of staying the same, staying unchanged. That's why people don't change, right? So this is a balancing act. So when the pain of not changing becomes greater than the pain of staying the same, then people will change, right? And it's very hard to do, because what ends up happening is people then want immediate relief from the pain. And so they become impatient. They try and take shortcuts. They try and negotiate with reality. And that impatience also leads to increased risk aversion. So they're impatient. They feel exposed and insecure. And so they don't want to take risks. But the reality is most change takes time. A big ship takes a long time to curve. A small motorboat takes much less time to curve. There are physics at play here. And life changes tend to be like big ships. Changing your mind, changing your diet, these are faster things. Changing your house, slightly slower, right? I can change my mind in a moment. Moving house takes a bit more time. Moving country takes even more time. Changing life direction can take years, right? So these are all fractals and scales.
Um, Absolutely agree on change takes time because I have personally experienced that. Now, let's say that once people identify that the pain of staying same is absolutely horrendous, but at the same time they might have responsibilities, fiscal demands that they have to fulfill, how they can start steering away in the direction they want to go, along the same times managing those, because you mentioned lastly when we spoke that you took like six-figure salary cut when you decided to change shift careers. That's a
Yeah,
substantial move, and I definitely have huge respects for you because you are able to do that. Now, if same situation is thrown at me at the moment, it would be very tough
of
because
course,
mortgage, kids, responsibilities,
100%.
family back home, yeah, 10 different things, right? So
Yeah.
in that regards, how would you advise that person?
So, like all things in life, it's extremely hard because what works for one person doesn't work for another. Personally, I don't have kids by choice. And so for me, there was that much less risk and pressure. But I did have mortgages. I did had all the social prestige of being a very senior lawyer, in my late 30s. I had the social pressure and peer pressure of people who I know, my peers doing very well financially, and then I'm doing this crazy thing and not earning any money. They going on nice holidays, they have, nice cars. I didn't have any of those things, or I had to choose not to have those things for a few years. It's really hard, So I don't think one size fits all. What worked for me, Parth, was two things. One was inversion thinking, which we talked about the last time, right? If I wanted myself to fail, what would I be doing, right? And then do the opposite to give myself a chance of succeeding. Not that I will definitely succeed, but there's a chance. But if I do these things, I will fail. So I try to do the opposite, right? And that's very hard. Once you understand the principle, then you have to make the choice. So that brings me to the second way of thinking about this, which is that there are choices to be made. I don't remember who it was. There's some philosopher, some economist who said, in life, there are no solutions, there are only trade offs, right? So you have to give up something, and there's a trade off to be made to acquire something. If you want to save money, you lose time. That's why, if you can't afford a plane and you take a bus, you will save money, but you will lose time. It's a trade off. Both are solutions, right? But there are trade offs in each. And if you take a plane, you lose money and save time. Also a trade off. So when it comes to these life circumstances, it's a trade off. You could take a very big risk. I'm not a fan of taking huge risks, in the sense that I wouldn't bet the farm on things, but I am willing to suffer for my dreams, right? So I wouldn't take a risk of losing the mortgage or losing the house and being homeless, but I would take the risk of extreme financial stress short of losing the house, right? As long as it's a reversible decision, and knowing fully well that that period of extreme anxiety could last for months, maybe even more than a year. Psychologically prepared for that. So when I'm coaching my students, I tell them, I said, don't think about the next month. Think about how miserable you are right now when you're struggling and things are not making sense and you're having imposter syndrome. And assume that in 2026, you're still feeling the same. Would you still do it? Right.
And you have invested this whole year trying to get out of it, and still you are in
Uh,
that
It
adds
could
more
happen.
pressure. Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
you got to
So
think about it, and people say, oh, you did it really fast. And I'm like, well, tell me where you were in 2017. And then most people realize, oh, that's a long time ago. And they're like, hang on, what was I doing in 2017? Right. That was when I started. Right. Think about the time that has gone. So don't try and be in a rush, because emotionally that's what we want to do, is be in a rush, because it's soothing us. It gives us relief. But being in a rush, see, there are only three reasons, Parth, in anything in life, from parenting to coding, whatever it is, there are only three reasons that I found people fail: wrong plan, bad execution of the right plan, or wrong expectations. Only three things. And if you have the wrong expectations, you'll make the wrong plan, or you'll execute badly on the right plan. So wrong expectations is a very, very dangerous thing. So thinking that I'm going to achieve this in 2 months, there's one thing to hope, there's another thing to expect it, right? It's okay to hope secretly that, oh, maybe I'll get there really fast. But you should expect to not, and plan as though it's going to take you 2 to 3 times longer than you expected. If it takes that long, would you still want it? Right? Then you know how committed you're going to be for a very long period of time.
Absolutely. Great summarization of all of this. And the thing that you mentioned about trade-offs, I'm not sure if it was economist or whoever, but I'm an architect, so definitely it's something that I would definitely say
Yeah.
there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs to everything.
But
Good,
everything,
fast,
right? You
and exist.
correct, good, fast, cheap. You have the classic trilemma, classic trilemma, right? So you trade off your high availability with consistency, or whatever it is that you need to do, right? That's just life.
Exactly. So tell me, how was your Google interview like? Because we are talking about now tech subject. How did
Yeah,
that?
it's like any other big tech interview. It was multiple rounds, and it wasn't easy because I was in Australia at the time when I was doing it, and it was for the office in Sunnyvale. So it was very early morning my time. And I'm not a morning person, so doing the technical rounds in that situation is not good. But look, I keep telling people you have to be lucky, right? So when I was at Google, I trained in Google to be an interviewer because I wanted to do interviews as well to learn more about that side. And as part of that process, you shadow other experienced interviewers, right, to learn from them, and then you can start doing independent interviews in your own. So I know your question is about me being on the candidate side, but I'll share a perspective from the hiring side and then connect the two dots, right? And before I became an engineer, I was on the hiring side in law and management and stuff. I've done that stuff, right? Even when I had my own startup, all of that. And there are certain meta principles that apply, whether it's engineering or law, doesn't make a difference. Hiring is hiring. The hiring manager has certain meta needs. And I found that no matter which industry I was in, the interviewer on the day is not in your control. And they could be a good interviewer, a bad interviewer. They could have prejudices just like anybody else. Google goes through a lot of effort to try and get rid of prejudices, right? All big tech companies do. But human beings are human beings. And there were some interviewers that I shadowed who I knew were very traditional, old school, still edit in Emacs kind of, software engineers, right? And they had an expectation that if I know this, you should know it. There is no way I would have passed if I had them as an interviewer. But the interviewers that I had, fairly more recent engineers, were much more interested in seeing what I knew and how they could collaborate with me to connect the dots, right? And so it didn't matter if I didn't know something. What mattered is, did I communicate it properly? Did I get the help in the appropriate way? And was I moving in a directionally valid way, right? I ended up solving the problems reasonably well. I didn't complete all of them, because of 3 or 4 rounds, but it was at least the kind of interviewer who was genuinely not looking to exclude me, but looking to include the candidate. Very different kind of interviewer, right? They're not filtering you out, they're trying to filter you in, which is a very different experience. So I got lucky. I had good interviewers all along, right? There were other FANG companies where I had really good interviews, but there was one particular round, I won't mention the company, it's one of the other big ones in FANG, where the final round interviewer, they asked me to do a Linux file system sort of implemented from scratch, and I didn't know how to do it, like the basic. Yeah, it is hard. And I don't have a full computer science background. I tried my best using tree data structures and all the rest of that, but you could see that I wasn't what they wanted me to be. And that was the eventual decision. Fine. So it was the final round, I lost out. But that was luck. So if I wasn't good enough for one of the other FANG companies, but I was good enough for Google, means that I'm probably about the same for everybody. Just that on the day the interviewer decided that they didn't want someone like me, or they had someone better. That's luck. That's just how it is. So that's the way. So I decided. So I mean, the Google interview, I was lucky. I had good interviewers. I had prepared, and this is what I keep telling people as well, that I had two different plans. First, I wanted to become a software engineer. And I only targeted companies. I did a lot of research. I targeted companies that weren't doing fancy DSA problems here in Australia, right? So there was a subset of the market that don't do DSA, that actually want you to do real work, and measure you on your ability to deliver. And I got all four of those offers. and I created a completely different, separate plan for Fang. That separate plan took 6 to 8 months, but it was a dedicated. Here's how Fang hires. Here's how I need to prepare for it. Very different from learning to code and becoming an engineer. And again, this I understood because I've been on the hiring side. I know that different hiring systems are filters, and you have to know the filter before you prepare the material that goes through the filter. So hope that helps.
Absolutely. So, why I took the path, because that's the path that they wanted me to go over at the Fang level. So that's why I did went through the DSA prep. I like I have done about like 400 ish videos on different DSA topics. And still, if someone asks me that what is the best way to hire someone, I would just say that put me in a room with him and let me speak with them. I don't
Right.
want to know that whether you know linked list or dynamic programming or whatnot, but
Right.
I just want to know the person, that what kind of skills and caliber they have. Next question is, why do I teach DSA? That's what the companies are looking for, and that's why
Looking
I'm
for.
trying to help people. Exactly.
Correct. So you have to play the game whether you like it or not. You have to play it according to the rules of the system. If it's not DSA, it'll be something else. People will start hiring for that, right? Or people will start training for that. That's just how it is. That's just how it is.
Exactly, exactly. So now, how was your time at Google? Like, what was some of the, because that was the period you mentioned. I think it was 3, 4 years back, like
Yeah.
around peak COVID, mass hiring. Google is stretched out thin because everyone is just working remote, and then their usage has gone like 30% up. Like extremely different times than what we see today. But how did it felt? How, what did you learn? How did it grow on you? And
Google, so it was a difficult time for the whole world, right? There was, and Australia went through very extreme lockdown. So I was in the situation where we had actually packed up my house. My ex-wife and I had packed up a house. We had booked the shipping container. We were ready. She had quit her job. And then Trump was still in the administration. Then he finally decided to shut down the US. Meanwhile, Australia had already shut down, right? We had an 18-month long, extremely difficult lockdown, very tight, right? And so I was able to go to the Google office in Melbourne, and I'd been to the ones in the US before that, but I hadn't actually been able to formally relocate. But most of my team was there. So, but I'd gotten used to working remotely before that anyway, because I've been working with remote teams since 2008. Even as a lawyer, when we did multinational, sort of deals, we had to do it. So, I was familiar with how to do that. I found the Google experience very, very good, but I had a big advantage, right? But I'd already worked in very big companies before. And so a big company is a big company is a big company, right? It doesn't matter what kind of kombucha they stock, what kind of snacks they give you. From an organizational perspective, they're all more or less the same, especially when they get listed on the public stock exchanges. There are certain behavioral shifts that happen in the company. So I didn't have any illusions. I didn't think Google was a startup. I knew it was a big tech company and a big, big tech company. The one interesting insight I had, Parth, when I was in Google, which I never thought about outside, is that Google is bigger than most of the people who use Google, right? Like as a company and a tech stack, it's so much bigger than most of even its customers, right? The vast majority of its customers are smaller. And so everything I knew from the outside world was not that relevant, right? Like I wasn't using GitHub. They have their own internal Git and version control systems. It's the largest monorepo in the world. It's so big you can't download the code onto your laptop. It's all done in the cloud, right? So I know other fan companies have this as well, but this is all new to me. I was 1 year into engineering, and everything I'd learned was, I suppose, conceptually useful, but the tools are completely different. And that triggered a lot of imposter syndrome, as it would. I'm sure that even if I was a more experienced engineer, I would have felt a lot of imposter syndrome because, you walk in thinking, oh my God, it's Google. And these guys are all, really smart and I don't really belong here. Very quickly, I found out that they're just like everybody else. They're good people, then some are not so good. There's some great people. On the whole, I say Google does hiring really well. So the people are awesome, better than a lot of the other big companies, and they pay well. So it attracts a certain kind of person as well, and all that. So they really, and the hiring system is super scientific. I really love it, right? I had a great time, but it was difficult because of COVID. And then, on my personal life, things were not great. My marriage ended up ending, we were on good terms and all that, but there were lots of change. And by that time I was what? 41 going on 42, so I wasn't the youngest person anymore. I'd rebooted my career. I was 2 to 3 years inside into coding, and I realized, Parth, that as much as I loved Google, it wasn't a startup. my heart was with fast moving places. Two, because I was starting off at a fairly junior level and the company was so large, I could have vanity metrics, like the things I'm working on are used by 200 million people or whatever, right? But the reality is, I don't believe I had the kind of impact that I wanted. I wanted to do something and see the result the next day. And that's not what happens in the big companies. And that's fine for some people. It wasn't right for me. And the third thing was, once I turned 40, and my priorities in my life changed, because I realized I'm halfway through my life. I have another half of my career left, but it's literally 50% done. It's behind me in the rearview mirror. And I have one more chance to build the kind of career I want ahead of me. And I said, any time spent on things that aren't aligned with my values is a waste of time, because I'll never get this time back. And so I said, okay, I want to be in a startup environment. I was already coaching at that point in time. I really enjoy that. And I want to be able to live and work remotely. So when Google opened up and said, now you have to move to California, I said, I don't think I want to do that anymore. I didn't want to move to the US anymore. And so that's why I left. I said, okay, this is probably not the right place for me in the longer term. But I had nothing but fond memories, great experiences. But it was a hard thing. It's hard to leave a place like Google because, again, trade-offs and self-doubt and insecurity and fear, all of that.
Great to understand. When you talk about that tech stack that Google and all of these big tech companies have, like
Yeah.
something that they build for their entire internal employees ends up becoming like the big
The
thing.
product. Yeah.
Product, right? Absolutely. There are like hundreds of examples of that. Like
Yeah.
Cassandra DB that Facebook built for their own internal fans. It's like one of the biggest NoSQL databases
Yep.
in the world. Or
AWS
AWS,
was built
exactly.
for
AWS.
Amazon.
Bezos
Yeah.
Memo. It's like
Yeah. Correct.
brings in like $600 billion in revenue. It's like one of the
Correct. Yeah. Kubernetes was built internally for Google
Kubernetes.
to manage large scale
Exactly,
orchestration. Yeah.
exactly. That's it. Kubernetes, it's like one of the, if you master Kubernetes, one of the best jobs that you can aim in any company. So that's absolutely, and I personally also struggled with imposter syndrome when I first joined Microsoft. It's like everyone is so smart, and then here it's me, and what
Yeah.
am I doing with these people? And
Yeah.
then yeah,
I don't
it fades
belong
away,
here.
but
It
exactly.
fades away. And this is the other thing I keep telling my students and even my colleagues at work. The thing is, Parth, we live with ourselves every minute of the day. We know every thought that goes through our head. We know every lie that goes through our head. We know every truth that goes through everything, right? Every fear. And so we have this habit of comparing how we feel on the inside with how people appear on the outside. And that's an unfair comparison, but it makes the imposter syndrome worse. Right. I'm sure a lot of people, that's why I talk so openly about imposter syndrome, because a lot of people may look at me and say, oh, he's so confident and whatever. But no, there are days when I feel incredibly incompetent, anxious, insecure, unequal to the task. Like, oh my God, everybody else knows so much more than I do. I don't even know basic things. This happens even now, but my idea of what's basic is way ahead of what was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Now basic means something else, right? This is just part of the human condition. I think this is just how we are.
Absolutely. I totally agree on that. Now, knowing what you know now, let's say if you had to redo the last 20 years of your career, what would you change? What would you say to younger Zubin, or your nephew, or your friend, or someone you're mentoring who is just in their 20s and gleam in their eyes?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. This is actually why I ended up starting my own podcast last year, and I called it "Easier Said Than Done," because I've collected a collection of ideas and principles that are much easier to say than they are to do. But those are all the things that I'd wish I'd known when I was 12, 13 onwards, right? But it really boils down to this. Whether we like it or not, are the only ones who have the power to change our life. No one's coming to rescue us. It doesn't matter. Oh, I just dropped some coffee. It doesn't matter whether you're a victim or you're this or that. It doesn't matter, because sure, it'll matter to you emotionally in the moment, but no one's coming to rescue you. No one's coming to change things. You can't rely on dumb luck, but you have a chance every single day to be intentional about what you want, and then decide. And Elon Musk says this really well, right? He said this many years ago before he's sort of acquired some amount of infamy now, but he said this many years ago. He said, if there are things that that are worth pursuing, even though the probable outcome is failure, you should try, right? And I think when you want something badly enough, so ultimately, what I wish I'd known 20 years ago is that pretty much the entire education system is set up to generalize and give you a piece of paper that may have nothing to do with skills. That 90% of what you do at the workplace is not what you learned in your formal education, and that you get to choose what happens next, or at least what you pursue. And the other thing I'd say is it doesn't matter whether you're super smart or not. Like we are, as a culture, we're obsessed with intelligence. As long as you're average or above, you can have anything you want in the world, but you can't have everything you want. Trade-offs. You can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. And I think that'll just that empowers me a lot. And I think it empowers a lot of my students as well.
No, absolutely. Golden words. I genuinely say this because many people don't realize this. And personally, it took you 20 years, me also somewhat like 10, 12 years to learn these things, these profound, I would say, like universal rules. It's not even
They're
that,
universal truths. Correct.
it's not that something I found, some like, it's not something that occurred to me. It's just something that I
They exist
discovered because it exists, right? It
independent
exists.
of us. These are the physics of reality.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, I would just like to add one tiny snippet on that. That many times people want something really bad, really hard. They get it, and then they realize that they need something else, but they don't want to let go that thing because for which they have
Sunk
already
cost.
worked so hard. So,
Yeah. Sunk cost fallacy. Yeah.
yeah, just I know absolutely you've done this fantastically throughout your career and since 2017 at least, but be willing to let things go if you feel genuinely attracted towards something else, because it's only going to make your life much more happier. You would
One thousand.
be more calm, composed person.
And Parth, let me ask you a question. Honestly, how many of your best made plans? So two parts to the question. One is how many of your best laid plans actually happened, and two, how often were you actually wrong about everything you thought was going to happen, right? And still, do you believe your outcomes are great?
Outcomes have been absolutely great. How many times plans absolutely worked? Less than 1%. How many times I thought it's going to work? 99%. And still, yeah. And still, right now, looking back, I can say it happened for the best reason. And it was the best thing that I decided to move on, I decided to get out of it. Because it changed me, it changed my, exactly.
And you know, this is there even in the Bhagavad Gita, right? We do not know enough to be pessimistic, but also we are wrong so much more than we are right on both the positive things we anticipate and the negative things we fear, which basically means we don't know anything. So all we can do is be open to the experience and have a little trust in ourselves that even if things go wrong, I will figure it out. Dekha jayega. We will sort it out, right? Which is a really, really important principle, is to let go of the need that it must be like this for us to be happy. We don't know anything about what happened. All we can do is try. And with that, the opportunities that you end up getting are so much more different, diverse, exciting, rewarding, so much more than we could have ever imagined on our own, because we are limited by imagination.
For sure. So, on that happy note, yeah, I think I'm done with all of my questions. Again, if you have something, feel free, or I'm
Well, what I'd like to know from you, Path, because you've obviously done so much, you've also taken big risks, you've paid extraordinary prices, you've put yourself in situations that are hard for the ego, hard for the emotions. What is your answer to that question on looking back? What do you wish you had known 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15?
there is a beautiful movie called Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Not sure if you've seen it, but if you
No, that's the
have,
one with Brad Pitt, right? I haven't seen it
Brad
yet.
Pitt, reverse aging, I would definitely
Right.
recommend. Like, I
Okay.
work for a movie company. I currently work at Cineplex. It's the largest movie chain in Canada, and I rarely recommend movies to anyone. It is one of those movies that are so profound in life, the whole context is just meaningless. some boy born at 95 and then goes reverse aging.
Backwards.
The
Mm.
Sharknado 7 seems like that kind of concept, but still, the last 30 seconds of that movie says that some people are meant to get struck by lightning, some people meant to just sit by the water, and then some people are meant to dance. Like, for what it worth, just do whatever you like, and even if you can't do it, don't just get stressed over yourself, because life is a gift, and we are the envy of billions of people, like you sitting in Australia and me sitting in Canada. Yeah,
Yes,
like we are
absolutely.
the envy of billions of people that are going through things, and that we may have somewhere felt when we were back home as well, but still, there are like trillion to one chance that we are currently sitting in two different continents and be able to speak with each other in real time, because everything in universe is out there to kill us, including
Totally.
stars and exploding dwarfs and neutron stars and things like that. So
Totally.
can't we just take a moment and be happy that we have this moment and just shared experience, like collective human experience, that we are able to do this, something so profound? And
Yeah.
then why do we get worried about, will I get my next pay bump, or will I get this job? Like, if you like it, try it, do it. If you get it, awesome. If you don't get it, try something else and then live your life. Like, if I were younger, I would have just
Completely.
said the same thing. Yeah. And that's the advice I'm going to tell my daughters when they come to an age. Like, do whatever you wants to do. You can become whatever you want to become. I i just want to see that you live the best life you want to have. You want
Uh,
to hop on a bike and go or cross country across Europe, do it.
Do it. Do it.
Yeah,
And it's so great that because I was going to ask you about your kids, because this is the that is a great example, because a lot of my students are in their 30s, right? My coaching students. And I mean, I work with so few. So when I say a lot, I just mean as a percentage. And I often ask them when they, anxious about this, stressed about that, worried about this, doubting themselves. I just ask them, what would you tell your kids? And the weird thing part, all of them will tell their kids the right thing, but they tell themselves something different, right? I'm like, why can't you just follow your own advice that you would give to your children? Because there is a part of you that knows better, right? And we lose sight of that. So if you're saying something to your kids and you're not living it up to yourself, your kids are never going to learn, because they're going to watch and see you doing something different from what you're saying,
yeah. My
right?
kids, they want me do something and then they do it. If I'm picking
All
up that
kids do that.
toy,
Yeah.
they start cleaning it up. But if I say
Right.
that go and do this, that's it. They're just gonna ignore me. So
Kids don't listen to the words, they observe. At least from what I've
that's
seen,
it.
they observe and learn by example. So yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful message. I really hope everybody in your channel, those who've bothered to stay till the end, really pay attention to that, because I think that's the entire reason we have ambition, we do all this chasing and pursuit and building, is because we want to feel a certain way about ourselves when we are alone at the end of the day lying in bed, right? And often you can get to that feeling without having to go round and round in circles. You can just do things that give you that feeling.
Absolutely. Life is too precious to waste it on small stuff.
Yeah. I do understand why some people struggle, because I think people may look at us and say, oh, it's easy for you to say you've done XYZ. But I think your original point is correct, that no matter who we are, there are millions of people in the world who wish they had our life, no
Exactly.
matter how much we're suffering. So yeah, okay, you could say Parth and Zubin have a certain kind of life, but Parth and Zubin also look at other people and say, I wish I had their kind of life, right? And it never ends. And there are people who look at us and say, we wish we had your kind of life, and it never ends. So the point is, we all have the lives we have, and it's a
Exactly.
it's a gift. It's a gift, like you said.
It's a gift. It is. And if I could say someone, like, at least I wasn't into it before, but just a simple, like, at least try to meditate once a week.
Meditate,
That changed
100%,
my life. That's changed my life. It has changed like everything. Changed my persona,
100%.
perspective. Yeah. So
So I believe when in 2017 is when I picked up meditation, and I truly believe it helped me switch my career. I truly believe it, because it gave me clarity, it gave me gratitude, and it gave me focus. Just spending that time, it helped me get aligned. So I totally agree with you, 1,000%.
for sure.
1,000
So yeah, clarity, focus, and gratitude.
gratitude.
Yeah.
So